Good morning, and welcome to the IFS UK and Ireland User Group Summer Conference. Thank you all for supporting our events. I hope you find you all safe and well. We're very sad not to be seeing everybody at our annual conference this year, and we hope that our summer conference will help make up for the absence of that. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Amanda Miller and I'm the manager of the User Group. The User Group is run by a committee of volunteers who all work for IFS customers. We also have a couple of committee members who work for IFS and who assist us with liaison between our members and the company. The user group is independent of IFS, which allows us the freedom to react to requests from our members. And as members, we need you to stay in touch with us and to let us know if ever you have any concerns or requests that you would like us to follow up on your behalf. The presentation today has been supplied by DNASTREAM and the title is Making IFS Upgrades Easy. This event will take you through how DNASTREAM can help you to deliver a seamless and successful and cost-effective upgrade to IFS Applications 10. In this webinar, Andy Milner and Paul Windsor will cover some of the key benefits that IFS Applications 10 offers to help you build a solid business case for upgrade, and how DNASTREAM's smart upgrade framework approach will give you the certainty of what the upgrade will entail and how much it will cost. If you'd like to ask any questions during the presentation, please do so using the Q&A option. Please add your name to any questions so that we know who's asking, and I'll put all the questions to our presenters at the end of the presentation. If we don't manage to get through all the questions, we'll ask them to be answered after the event. The event today will be recorded and the recording will be available to all members on our website next week. So today we're very pleased to have on our webinar Petam, who is lead IFS technical consultant with over 12 years of experience in working with IFS applications, 2003, 2004, 7, 7.5, 8, 9 and 10. He specialises in monitoring, maintaining and troubleshooting single and multiple IFS instances to ensure smooth running. Petam has actively participated in many ERP implementations, rollouts and upgrade projects, covering all phases in the ERP lifecycle across multiple geographies. We also have Paul Windsor, who has previously held various senior program management and technology delivery roles at SAP UK, Logica, which is now CGI, and Team 121. He has more than 25 years experience across numerous IT and technology disciplines, including many full lifecycle ERP implementations in the industry sectors, including utilities, public sector, facilities management and manufacturing. Paul is a graduate engineer and combines extensive program delivery expertise with a strong technical grounding. That leaves me to introduce our first speaker today, which is Andy Milner. Andy has significant experience in senior consulting and management roles, including practice leadership and product management whilst at SAP UK and Wipro Technologies. He worked for a number of years in the deregulating gas and electricity markets and was closely involved in localization of the enterprise application solutions for the UK. Andy holds an MBA from Henley Management College. So I shall hand you over to Andy, and when Andy shares his screen with me, then we will also be able to share the screen. So over to you, Andy.
Okay, is that all clear? Okay, thanks everybody. Hopefully the sound is all okay. And thanks Amanda for that great introduction. So as Amanda said, we're going to be looking at upgrades today across the life cycle. And as Amanda said, the webinar will be recorded, so you can enjoy it back or any bits that you missed, and we'll collect up the questions at the end. So if we can move on to the agenda slide. Thanks, Paul. So here's what we want to cover today. So first of all, a little bit of the introduction that we've done. We're then going to look at some of the key drivers for upgrade. So why would you do an upgrade? There are various reasons and influences of why you would choose that. Then we'll look at some of the key considerations, and lessons we've learned over the years about upgrades and what works, what doesn't work, and how you might go about it in a structured way. Moving towards the close then, we'll look a little bit at our upgrade approach, which really consolidates that learning we've had over the years and builds a structure around which you can get a bit of certainty. So, and then finally, we'll be collecting up the questions. Amanda will be doing that, and all three of us will be there to answer as much as we can at the time. And if the more detailed answers are required, of course, we'll pass those through so that you can get those solutions that you're looking for. So, if we then move on now, little bit about us. Don't want to talk too much about us. Very keen to tell you a bit more about upgrades, but we have got some good experience in the team, not just with the attendees here, but more broadly. You can see some of our customers there, both of IFS and not. So we've got some upgrades under our belt, some projects of IFS and other technologies. So I think what we do bring is a bit of experience of how IFS can fit into a context in a company. I think that's really important. So, okay, we're planning to be about 45 to 50 minutes. We think will be the duration, but of course, if you're all keen with lots of questions, then we can go a little bit longer than that as well. So I'd now like to pass over to Paul Windsor, who'll be running the main section of the presentation, and I'll see you at the end when we pick up on the questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy. Good morning, everyone. I'm Paul Windsor. As Amanda has kindly introduced me earlier on, I'm the Technology Director at DNASTREAM, so I'll be taking you through some of the content of the webinar this morning. So as Andy has just run through the agenda, we're going to cover off some of the key drivers as to why customers are considering an upgrade to IFS Applications 10. We've drawn out 4 common drivers that most customers will probably recognise. Clearly, driving business benefit is one of the key drivers. Reducing operational costs is another, as well as mitigating operational risk. And also improving user adoption and engagement, hence looking to drive productivity, etc. So I'm going to go through each of these in a little bit more detail just now. So driving business benefit. Those of us who are old hands, if you like, with IFS applications will recognise that there's been a long history of innovation with IFS applications in the past. And we've drawn out some examples here. I'm thankful to IFS for this content mostly. So in 7.5, that's where we saw the introduction of Enterprise Explorer, which replaced the previous Centura interface, for example. And also a wide range of functionality improvements and the introduction of events and alerts, etc. In IFS Applications 8, that's where we saw the introduction of the ability to create custom fields, custom tabs, etc. And that's where we saw the first iteration of touch apps to allow people out in the field there to interact with the applications. At 9, we saw a focus on visualization with the introduction of lobbies and some of the visualizers, for example, in manufacturing, and then a clear focus on enablement in mobility and IoT, Internet of Things, to enable extensibility out into the greater enterprise. And really now with Applications 10, what we're seeing is IFS applications becoming the digital core, so enabling a range of different capabilities there. We've seen the introduction of the new Arena user experience, introduction of things such as the B2B portals and technician portals, new capabilities around integration, and clearly a focus on automation, etc., with new features around AI, virtual reality, merged reality, mixed reality, etc. All of which is really helping customers then to attack some of their growth strategies. For example, it could be servitization. We've seen a lot of movement in the market in recent years around customers in the service industries looking at servitizing their products and services. The obvious one being Rolls-Royce, as you may have seen in IFS press. Certainly applications 10 is helping customers to scale their operations, certainly if they've got multi-company or multi-currency requirements, for example. A continued focus on IoT and automation. The IoT connector, for example, enabling organizations to integrate seamlessly with their devices. And a big, obviously I've mentioned before, a big continued focus around AI, for example, to drive automation, for example, with condition-based maintenance or perhaps demand forecasting. There's also a focus on operational intelligence with new real-time analytics to help support faster and more accurate decision making. And a continued focus really around customer intimacy, sort of enabling organizations to get much closer to their customer through CRM and big improvements in customer engagement capabilities. In terms of reducing operational costs, really the key capabilities here that IFS applications will help is around improved productivity. So we're seeing over 500 functional improvements in applications 10. So that's offering us more sort of embedded industry-specific best practices now, helping to streamline business processes that might integrate beyond the organisational boundaries, for example, with the B2B portal, all of which is really helping to drive productivity by giving some real-time KPIs and a real focus on actions that need to be taken within the organisation via, for example, the new role-based lobbies that IFS Arena offers. We can also help to reduce IT costs. So the upgrade to applications 10 really is offering us a clear path to the evergreen future that IFS is now adopting, essentially enabling us to virtually eliminate the need for future upgrades using the evergreen approaches which IFS now adopting, which will be embodied within future releases of the software and the way in which IFS integrates and collaborates with its customers. But we can also reduce IT costs in other ways, for example, by taking advantage of the new layered application architecture that's been brought in by IFS, which enables us to much more easily manage custom objects, for example, making it simpler and less costly to maintain the application going forward, but also by leveraging really the IFS Arena user experience, which is a whole new sort of consumer first design, which users will find much more familiar really from using other web-based applications, helping to ease adoption really, helping to reduce training overhead, helping to drive better user engagement and productivity. We can also look to drive simplification with IFS applications 10, with it becoming the digital core, consolidating onto a single platform, for example, much improved integration capabilities to enable us to bring IFS, if you like, into the centre of our organisation with the new RESTful APIs that are now offered, extending our business processes beyond the enterprise, for example. I've mentioned that before with things like the B2B portal, with integration to IoT, and obviously with the 500 or more functional improvements, a real possibility there to simplify by removing any legacy developments or custom modifications, etc., streamlining the solution and really driving simplification to enable our support and maintenance and cost of ownership to come down. And delivering business insight. So IFS Apps 10 really is now more connected than ever, with the continued focus on IoT integration, and in particular the new device agnostic IFS Arena interface, so enables us better interaction with field-based staff, for example, and it also offers us now the real sort of inbuilt real-time analytics capabilities that can drive decision making at pace, all of which can be surfaced through these new role-based lobbies which are now coming into IFS applications 10. So the third area is around mitigating operational risk. So clearly, with a supported and modern platform such as IFS applications 10, we can see how that might be possible. The kind of things it enables us to tackle really is around business agility. You can imagine that customers running older versions, perhaps less functionally rich versions, can see that as a constraint on the ability of the business to react to market trends and drive some competitive advantage. Perhaps the functionality is not all there. So that's important, therefore, that applications 10 will be able to fill that gap. Product support, pretty hot topic, I'm sure, for many people. I'm sure we all know that applications 9 has now entered the restricted support stage. So clearly the innovation path, if you like, for that version and those before it is coming to an end. Clearly that could pose a potential risk in terms of being able to access support in an effective manner. Could bring costs with it. So those kind of things need to be taken into consideration, but also perhaps access to things like legal change and security patches could be restricted. So it's an important consideration for us to think about. The IT estate itself is an important consideration, of course. So we all know that IFS applications is pretty tightly coupled with the underlying database and operating system. And of course, that brings with it certain constraints potentially with compatibility, for example. So if we're running older versions of IFS solutions, then it may be the fact that we're sort of in a cul-de-sac. Maybe we've been able to upgrade our broader estate that supports that. So Windows Server, for example, or your Oracle database, etc., all of which could pose a risk to our business should a critical event take place with some of those application components, which might force us, if you like, down a route of having to do something about it, which we may not necessarily want to do at that point in time. The platform itself is an interesting one, because clearly the older versions, particularly of the client architecture, is now outdated. And with the advent now of IFS Arena, which is a real significant innovation, replacing Enterprise Explorer, and obviously the native Arena apps for mobile now allow us to move forward without touch apps. So it's a real way of mitigating the risk around having a non-responsive client architecture, for example. Much better user engagement from that perspective. And also with delayed application architecture that's now come to bear with IFS applications, certainly helps us to far more easily customize and localize our solutions without affecting the core software, clearly mitigating some risk there about how we deal with those following upgrades and also during the update processes, for example. And finally, but quite importantly, compliance. So clearly we all have a need to comply with corporate policy, but some of us have a need to comply with certain industry regulations and other regulations which drive our industry, for example. So it's really important, therefore, that our core applications really support that for us. So things like GDPR, new financial standards, etc. HMRC's Making Tax Digital initiative, for example, all of these are areas that the latest versions of IFS applications can really help us to comply with. And finally, the fourth driver really around improving user adoption and engagement. So this is really all driven by the new intuitive and responsive Arena user experience. So we're seeing a completely redesigned consumer-first approach now to how the applications interact with the end user, far more intuitive than before. It will be very familiar to people who are used to using web-based applications of a similar nature, and applications on their mobile devices, for example, and it makes it very easy now really to customize the application to the specific needs of the individual user, and provide ease of access to common functions, it's helping to improve productivity. Importantly, it is completely device agnostic as well, so we can use whichever device we choose, whether it's a desktop or a laptop or a tablet or a smartphone. With Arena now being built using the very latest technologies, and it's fully browser based, of course. So there's no client software in effect to install any longer. So all that headache, I suppose, of having the overhead of rolling out client software and keeping it up to date has now gone away. Just touch on transition as well on here. In terms of transitioning, it is important to note that with IFS applications 10, Enterprise Explorer is still available. So it's not necessary for everybody to move across straight away onto IFS Arena. So it does give you the opportunity really to decide what the best approach to deployment for you will be, whether that's by functional area perhaps or by department. Although from releases beyond IFS applications, 10 Arena will be the default interface. So I guess that's an important consideration for those of us considering what timing we have in terms of an upgrade, and whether we want to move straight to applications 10, which will give us some flexibility in terms of deployment approaches for Arena, or whether or not we move beyond that point, which of course then brings in with it the change aspect, I suppose, in terms of how we deploy out the new interface and the new user experience. So Andy mentioned earlier on about the business case, very briefly, in terms of, what is the business case for doing an upgrade? Well, obviously every customer is different. Every customer will have their own individual needs and drivers, but we've put together some ideas in terms of what some areas of the business case could look like, given the move to applications 10. I'll just quickly touch on some of these to give you an idea of the kind of things that we can help you to do in terms of building your own business case for moving to applications 10. So we mentioned productivity gains before. Clearly that could be driven through things like role-based lobbies, allowing a single point of reference for users there to get the information they need to do their job and to access real-time KPIs, make decisions quicker. A focus on management by exception, really, enabling people to sort of see what actions they need to take to make sure things are progressing smoothly in their business. For field service organisations, there could be a focus perhaps on rework and first-time fix rates, for example, out in the field. So we could see that benefit sort of being delivered by having seamless access to the full customer history and job details, asset details, etc., all with supporting documentation delivered straight to the end user's device. We can see a benefit certainly from IFS Arena's native apps. They're certainly more efficient. The workflows are more efficient certainly in that app than the old touch apps. It's far more intuitive, all of which can help to drive some process efficiency. Keeping with the Arena theme, of course, you can imagine that the onboarding and adoption process could be much simpler. So certainly every user needs to have some form of training, whether you're starting in a new business and you need to learn how to use the application to do your job, or whether you're moving to a new role and you need to be retrained, for example. So the intuitive nature really and the more familiar user experience you can imagine could drive some benefit there. And of course the cross-device support's important here as well, in terms of ensuring it is a consistent experience across the different types of modes of use. All of which is helping to improve adoption rates. Better adoption really does lead to better performance. In terms of IT costs, we touched on some of these before, but a couple of key ones that could be important for making your business case, such as reducing support overhead, certainly where you've got to support older or unsupported versions of databases and operating systems, etc. That might take you time, it might cause a risk, which might have a cost associated with it. And we can imagine that there's going to be a reduced maintenance overhead, where we can potentially remove some legacy customizations or custom developments because of the new features that IFS Applications 10 gives us, enables us to reduce that maintenance overhead. So we no longer need to support those applications. In terms of market positioning, we can imagine that IFS Applications 10 might enable us to access some of that competitiveness that we're looking for. Certainly by the new embedded industry-specific functionality that IFS Applications 10 gives us to enable us to sort of drive that competitive edge. We might be able to offer some new and improved services to our customers through the Applications 10 capabilities, and of course integration with our partners and better accuracy of data, for example, via the B2B portal, could be a real driver for benefit to enable us to streamline those processes and drive some performance improvements. And finally, but by no means last, business risk. We touched on risk earlier, but certainly there is a cost to risk in most organisations. A lot of organisations will make provision for risk, and we can imagine that some of that benefit could be delivered through the reduced risk of having a critical event take place, perhaps in some of our unsupported platforms like the database or the operating systems, for example. But also improve compliance with corporate policy, for example, and regulatory policy, enabling us to make sure that we're not falling foul of any risk in those areas. Okay, so preparing for an upgrade, we've drawn out some key considerations here, which customers will want to think about when they're looking at the potential for an upgrade. So the first area we've thought about here is upgrade strategy. And it's a key decision point for many customers, particularly for those on older versions of IFS who are looking to drive business value from perhaps some additional functionality or streamline business processes. And we've really got three broad options when it comes to the strategies that you might want to take. The first is a technical upgrade, basically says what it means. This is really where we're bringing the application up to the latest release. We might adapt to some degree some of our business processes, but largely they'll continue unchanged. Although it could involve some simplification, perhaps by removing legacy modification and custom developments, this would tend to be the most least complex upgrade strategy. The second strategy could be the technical upgrade with functional improvements. So this is where we're looking at, if you like, a little bit more than just a technical upgrade. We might want to adopt some new functionality which is now available in applications 10 that wasn't there before, or perhaps making some other improvements to our business processes that's made possible now by the capabilities of applications 10. And the final strategy will be what we call an application migration to IFS applications 10. So this is really where we're looking to completely move on to a new applications 10 platform, redefine our business processes to make the best of the capabilities of the application, adopt the best practices that are now embedded in the solution. Clearly, as you can imagine, the most complex of the three different approaches. Another area of key consideration is the deployment model. Many customers in the past, of course, have been on-premise, but more and more customers are now moving into the cloud. It's a consideration for us really in terms of where the complexity might lie in an upgrade, because of course you've got to then deal with the services that are provided by your cloud hosting partner, for example. So it's important to understand that dynamic really as to who's responsible for what, and making sure that we've got the right processes in place to deal with those kind of complexities. And indeed, some customers may also use an upgrade to take advantage of a cloud migration at the same time or as part of that process, to take advantage of the cloud because you're having to do some work in the application in any case. And perhaps even some people might consider wanting to migrate back from the cloud. Who knows? But there's certainly some considerations there in terms of the scope that we might want to look at. The current version of IFS clearly is a real consideration for us, and because this largely dictates really what the upgrade roadmap might look like for us. So I'm sure you can appreciate that customers running later versions such as IFS applications 9, it's a more simple upgrade process. Certainly for customers that are running much older versions, say 7.5 SP3 or before that, then it's a more complicated upgrade process. It's in fact, it's 2 stages of upgrades rather than a single step. So that then I guess will bring around the question of what's the best upgrade strategy given where we're starting from today. So those two sort of things might come together for customers to make the decision about how they want to approach the upgrade. And of course, there's also considerations around what the change impacts might be, particularly for older versions where you might be using the Centura interface, for example, and moving on to Enterprise Explorer, or even adopting IFS Arena. So those things are important to consider as well. And let's not forget, of course, everybody will recognise this, what's the scope of our CRIM objects? So simply put, really, the number and complexity of particular modifications, for example, and custom objects will be a key factor in setting the scope of the upgrade project. And we certainly need to define an approach that effectively deals with each of these, ideally by looking to remove them, but certainly by uplifting them to make sure they run correctly with applications 10 where they're still necessarily required. But also we need to consider the integration landscape, because this can give rise to some complexity within the upgrade approach. Particularly where IFS solutions might be sat within a large integration landscape. More than anything, really, I guess it will drive the testing scope to make sure that the integrations and the data flows are all working correctly as part of the upgrade process. So Andy mentioned as well earlier on that we wanted to share with you some lessons learned from our experiences in other projects, etc. And we've pulled out a few here. We could probably go on for quite a while about different types of lessons learned. We pulled out some key ones that we think might be interesting to share with you. The first of which is, I've called it set up for success. And I guess what it's really all about is making sure that we have the right mix of resources within our upgrade project, and that it's a good mix of people with the right kind of business knowledge, who understand the business processes, and the IT people who understand how the current applications and the integration, for example, is all set up, so we get access to the right information to be able to make the right decisions during the process. And I'm sure you've all been told before at some point in your careers that, you know, it's very important to get the best people out of the business, and those might be the ones that the business really don't want to let go. We've all had those conversations, and sure, where we're negotiating with stakeholders to try and get the people out of the business to support a project. And with an upgrade, as with an implementation, for example, that still stands really. Second sort of big lesson we've learned is around data. And the upgrade really does give an opportunity for customers now to start looking at their data. It's quite common that if you've got an application that's been around for quite a long time, your data will be in, let's say, various states of health. So the upgrade itself could give an opportunity really to think about data cleansing. And it may also give an opportunity to think about data archiving, which is something that can certainly be a driver for performance improvements and could be a hindrance in terms of performance for customers running very large databases, for example. So it's really worth considering whether the upgrade gives you an opportunity to look at some of these areas alongside the upgrade, or it may be as a result of the upgrade. I've mentioned custom developments before, and you know, clearly this is a really key area. So wherever possible, it really is important that we start looking at the custom developments that are in the application at the moment and understanding where we can remove those and start to adopt standard functionality. As I mentioned previously, it gives all sorts of benefits in terms of simplification, in terms of support and maintenance going forward, much simpler updates, much smaller testing scope, for example, when we're looking to update the application going forward. So this is a real key area that can really help to drive down some cost of ownership. And I did touch earlier on change impacts, and certainly for DNASTREAM, this is one of our real sort of key areas. We're very focused as an organisation on end user adoption and driving performance of end users, and really managing the change impacts that might be brought about through the upgrade is a very important consideration, especially if you're looking to adopt Arena, for example, or maybe replace some of the touch apps functionality that you have today with something different with the native Arena apps, for example. And if you are making process changes, for example, so you do some simplification by removing some custom objects, maybe adopting some standard functionality, maybe some rolling out some new functionality that's not there today, all of that will have an impact, if you like, on the end user base. It's very important that we consider that to make sure that the people are able and ready to adopt those changes and sort of brought along with us really on the upgrade journey. And finally, end user adoption. In terms of adoption, what I'm really talking about there is making sure people are properly trained. We all know that yes, the application is really important, technology is really important, but what's going to really drive the benefits and the sort of outcomes that you're looking for as a business, well, that's really going to be the people using it correctly and people being able and capable of using it and using your applications in the right way to drive those business benefits. So we think it's very important that we focus our attention on making sure that the training and knowledge transfer processes are very effective as part of the upgrade project. So I'd just like to introduce what we've called our IFS smart upgrade approach, which Andy touched on earlier on. So it's a three-stage framework approach, basically, which allows us to sort of get involved with customers at an early stage with some very low commitment, and obviously at every stage we're building on proven methods and best practices, both of our own and obviously adopting the best practices recommended by IFS. It all starts with the rapid upgrade evaluation, which is a free service This is something which allows us to give you some real insight into what your upgrade process might look like, what your key considerations should be, some ideas about what the upgrade strategy might look like given what you've got today. It's a quick process, as the name suggests, but we think it can give you some real key insight early on without having to actually start expending money and start getting involved in complicated project setup, for example. Following that, we move on to a detailed upgrade assessment. As you can imagine, this is more detailed. It gets into the real depth of what you've got as an application, how it's been set up, what custom objects, what CRIM objects you've got, for example. Looks at some of the key features around your application, and from that we can then give you a real feel for the scope of the upgrade, what it will take to do, and indeed how much it will cost. And then, of course, finally, we've got as you'd expect, the delivery and support stage, which will follow one of the typical upgrade strategies. But we can also extend that with a range of different flexible add-ons that we offer, for example, cloud migration, if you're interested in that sort of approach. We can perform the data archiving. We can offer an extended support package, for example. There's all sorts of different sorts of things we can there to sort of help you through your journey and the upgrade process. So where will we get started? I'll just quickly run through what the free rapid upgrade evaluation actually does and how it works. So what is it? Well, as I mentioned before, it's a free, no obligation service, open to anybody who's considering an applications 10 upgrade, or any upgrade really for IFS for that matter. And whatever stage you're at, actually, whether you're just thinking about some information about what it might take, or whether you're actively looking at kicking off an upgrade project, it will still be applicable for you. It's a simple online questionnaire that we use to gather information. It's available on the website. It may be bolstered by a discovery session where we think that it's relevant to do so. Perhaps you've got a more complicated or more complex scenario that we could do with speaking to you about. And it typically takes us around a week or so to turn that around. But what do you get from that? Well, you get a summary report, which sort of outlines the key considerations for the upgrade. We also think about what the options are for your upgrade strategy, with a recommendation for which one will best suit your particular situation. We'll provide an outline of the scope of the upgrade that we think is appropriate for you, together with the RACI matrix, etc., so you understand how that would work in terms of roles and responsibilities, who'd be responsible for what. We'll also give you a firm fixed price for the detailed upgrade assessment stage, and where possible, and it's not always possible unfortunately, but where possible we can also give you an indicative sort of feel for what an upgrade might actually cost for you, given the situation that you've got. And we finish this off with a one hour walkthrough session to make sure that we speak to you and your stakeholders, so you understand the outcomes, can ask any questions, etc., before you actually decide what to do next. And there's no obligation, of course, at that point. You can take away the report and use it as you wish, really. So with that, I think I've come to the close of the content. I think I'll like to hand back to Andy at this point and see if we've got any questions that we'd like to address.
Yes, Paul, we have. I don't know, Amanda, would you like to do the questions, or?
I don't mind. If you want to go for it, you carry on. Fine.
Okay, so Matt Freeman, Paul, asked if we upgrade from 9 to 10, but we'd get a preview of Arena, but would we be facing a similar costly upgrade to going to 2020 almost immediately? Is it therefore worth the move, or better to wait for 2020? And it kind of links in. Matt was talking from 9 to 10. Sean Kerslake asked, we're currently considering an upgrade from apps 8 to 10, and really reprise the same sort of issues. What about Evergreen? And we'll be coming to the end of support of apps 10 in a couple of years. Is it worth moving directly? So I guess both questions are probably could we combine an answer, perhaps?
Yeah,
Paul.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and we get asked it quite a lot, to be honest, because we all know that the current sort of plans for support of IFS applications is standard support until March 2023. So clearly, it is, you know, it's a question that customers will be asking themselves. So in terms of, you know, is it best to go to 10 or to 2020? And is it difficult to get from 10 to 2020? I guess the answer is that we clearly covered this off with IFS themselves in terms of the transition approach between applications 10 and applications and IFS 2020. And all of the conversations we've had are sort of leading us towards the fact that it's not going to be a typical upgrade, if you like. So the scope of an upgrade from IFS applications 10 to 2020 will not be much lower than that, much less than that, because it of course assumes that you're on a, you know, you're adopting the latest updates to IFS applications 10. And that process then from applications 10 to 2020 is going to be much smaller than a typical upgrade. And I guess the timing does depend to some degree, I suppose, on what kind of benefit you can derive, I suppose, from the upgrade in terms of, you know, are there some compelling reasons why you need to access some new functionality or drive some performance improvement? Is applications 10 going to do that for you in the shorter term? Given the fact that there will be, yes, there will be a jump from applications 10 to IFS 2020 of some degree. So in essence, I suppose if I was in applications 8, I'm taking the second option there, I'd be thinking to myself that there probably is a reasonable amount of additional capability that applications 10 will give me straight away. So maybe that's a bigger driver. If I'm on applications 9 and going to 10, I guess it depends on what I'm using it for and where I can drive some benefit. Arena might be a big benefit for some people in terms of being able to drive, particularly out in the field, for example, where you might have better, more seamless processes out in the field using the native Arena apps than you get with touch apps today. Or if we've got some big customizations you can get rid of. Yeah, so I guess it's dependent on the customer's scenario, but to focus on the upgrade part at the end. Yes, it is a much smaller jump from IFS 10 for applications 10 to IFS 2020 than an upgrade. It's like I could term it a big update, let's say, rather than an upgrade. I don't know if Petham's got anything to add on that.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I would say I think like getting into the evergreen mode, the first step in getting into the evergreen mode is to get onto the latest update of applications 10, which is updated as we stand. So I would, if I put my customers hat, taking off IFS hat, I would see this as a blessing in disguise. For example, let's say if you want to roll out applications, upgrade of the IFS applications, you still can take two approaches. Either you can wait for some time and go into 2020 as in a big bang approach with quite a lot of changes into IFS, or else you can take the first step into applications 10 update 8 and roll out the changes into Arena systematically, I would say, in a very controlled way. It's very, ironically, I got the same question from a customer in telco industry. They are on applications 9, they asked the same question. And in their case, they have the backend operations as well as they have subcontractors using the B2C, B2B portal. So they were right up front saying, okay, we would go into applications 10 update 8, where we'll keep on using IEE for our backend users, as well as we'll open up Arena for our subcontractors because it's already a web-based application. And the progressive plan is to release each and every department every 3 months into Arena. So in that way, they could control the whole upgrade process. So there you go. You've got two options. Just something that I wanted to add on top of what Paul said.
Can I add a little there, if that's okay? Really emphasising on what you said there, Petham, and Paul brought it out earlier in the presentation, is that at Apps 10 you've got the choice of EE or Arena, and I think it's really important to think about what your organisation can take in terms of the level of change. of Arena clearly is a nice user interface, but it is different to what you will have experienced in EE. Right clicks and various things will change. So there is an impact there that's worth considering, and what your organisation is like in taking those changes. And there's one other thing, I suppose. It's for IFS 2020. How early do you want to be in adopting, a new solution? And that's usually organisations have got a N+1 or a thought process of how leading edge they want to be with their vendor, and balancing out that access to the latest and greatest functionality versus the newness of that and it bedding in. So that's another consideration I would be putting into the pot, let's say, in terms of what would suit, besides what Paul and Pethenham have said in balancing that decision. I hope that's helped Matt and Sean. Any further? And of course, as Paul's described, if you wish to put your information in on the website, we'd be happy to, come back, do some analysis, and come back and talk to you about it. No obligation beyond that. Don't know, Sean or Matt, if you'd like to. Okay, Matt's replied. That's great. So could a move from 10? So could a move from 10, update 8, sorry, to 2020 be something we could perform going forward, as you describe it, more like a large update than upgrade?
Yeah,
that's nodding away.
That's
there.
basically it. Yeah. So. I know, this is information that we're discussing with IFS. Of course, nobody's done it yet, have they? But this is how we understand it. It's not a full-blown upgrade, because a lot of the underlying technology components, for example, I think have already got onto the track, or will have got onto the track, if you like, at applications 10. So it's a much less complicated and a much less complex process of getting from the latest applications 10 update onto IFS 2020. So in essence, yes, it's like a big update essentially.
Okay, that's good. Great. Okay, thanks, Matt. That's the questions were really good, actually, at really getting at some of these balanced decisions, and good, thank you. Anybody else? Any more questions that have come through?
Doesn't look like it at the moment. What we'll do is I'll do a quick wrap up, and then if there's anything that if we have any further questions before I finish, then obviously we'll go through those. And we'll take it from there. So I hope you all enjoyed that and found it to be useful and informative. A big thank you to Andy and to Paul for their presentations, and to Pethenham for his technical support, and to DNASTREAM for supporting the IFS UK and Ireland User Group Summer Conference. We've got 7 more events planned during 2020. We have added some recently, so have another look at our events pages. And we're still in conversation with other partners to add more events over the next few weeks and months. We hope to see you all again at an event very soon. Thank you very much for attending today, and thank you for your continued support of the user group. Please send us feedback about this event so that we can improve if necessary. Stay safe and well, and hopefully we'll see you all in person in the not too distant future. Many thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Oh, I think we may have one last question. Let's have it. Okay, Matt is going to put you on the spot. They've got a single instance live sitting on Azure, and then 12 companies in that instance. What would you describe as a typical cost? Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Well, a small body and not a huge amount of customizations, mostly drop fields from an LU into standard forms.
Okay.
That's a good description, Matt, but if you wouldn't mind, put the rest of the information in our Ready Reckoner on the website. It's just one page with lots of easy drop downs, and honestly, we'd love to come back with a report and actually discuss it. But I promise you, it will be very competitive. We've built this upgrade structure to help customers get their upgrades done in an organised way, but also to make it cost effective for each step. So I think it'll be worth 10 minutes of you bashing that data in on that link. Hope that's okay. Well, I wasn't quite ready to do a live quote on air there.
but in essence, it doesn't sound particularly complex, does it?
No.
To be fair, so you wouldn't expect it to be hugely expensive. Although, of course, you're running on Azure, so you'll need to make sure there's appropriate engagement there to make sure we can get the right environment set up to do the necessary, etc. So there will be some cloud-based stuff to do. But yes, as Andy says, more than happy to come back to you with some suggestions and recommendations about what it might take if you can complete the questionnaire. That'd be great.
Okay, lovely. Well, thank you all very much indeed. Thank you guys for your presentations.
You're welcome.
And thank you all for attending, and we'll see you all again soon. Thank you.